Welcome to the second session of our May 2022 Accordance eAcademy. And you're in for something special. We've got Dr. Roy Brown. He is the OG Accordance user because he actually created the software himself. And Roy goes back, way back into Bible software, even back into the 80s. He had created a Bible software program called, it was originally called The Perfect Word. And then he sold that, and it was renamed by the company that bought it, Mac Bible. But he wanted to dig into something deeper and have biblical languages. And so that's when he created Accordance, which was launched officially in 1994. Dr. Brown holds a PhD from Baylor University, and he's also pursued postdoctoral studies from the Technion Israel Institute. He was part of the translation team for the Holman Christian Standard Bible, and he's taught Bible for many years in the United States and Israel in both English and Hebrew. So, Roy, we are so excited for you to be here today, and we look forward to your presentation. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Okay, what we're going to do is talk about the timeline in depth. This is a sort of I won't say it's a unique feature, but it's a special feature of Accordance that lets us look at the chronological relationship between people and events and other things that occur in time. And so what I'm going to do is focus on how to use the timeline. It'll be somewhat advanced because I believe the title of this was called Taking the Timeline to the Next Level. Well, we'll be taking it to the next level, and this will be an overview on how to best use the timeline. So let me go ahead and turn myself off so we can focus on the screen here. And I'm starting now with just an Accordance screen where I did a search for Omri. But before I get to that search, what I'm going to do first, though, is actually open a timeline. And we're going to start from the very beginning. Some of you have not had experience with timelines. So we're going to start. There's three ways to open a timeline. The simplest way is to go to the File menu, New tab, and then you go down toward the bottom here where it says Timeline. This opens up, you see, to a timeline. It did it on the right side because by default, it goes to another zone because it is a different kind of tab. It's not a Bible tab, it's a timeline tab. So it automatically puts it in a separate zone so that you can look at the same time with the Bible text and with the timeline text here. And this opened up in the middle. There are certain defaults we can set on this, but right now all we've done is just simply open up the timeline. There are two other ways of opening up the timeline. Another is to go to the tab, or rather the toolbar, which I have closed, but we can then, I don't even have timeline on here, but this will be a good exercise to show how to add it. So we'll go down here and say Customize Toolbar, and here's the timeline. So I'm going to drag it right up here next to Instant Details. And I'm done. In Windows, I believe the interface is a little different, but you can add the timeline. So the second way to open the timeline, if you have it up on your toolbar, is just simply click on it, and that does the same thing. The third way to open up the timeline is to go and open up the library, which you can do again from the toolbar, or you can do it from the window menu where it says library. Either way will open it. So we open up the library on the left, scroll down to the bottom, and usually you have to scroll through a lot of tools and text, and toward the bottom you see timeline. So you click on that, or double click I should say, and now you have the timeline. So those are three ways just to open up a timeline. Okay, now that's just simply if you just simply want to open it up and start using it. But many people will prefer to use it. I'm going to shut that down and turn off the library and turn off the tab to give us more screen space, or the toolbar rather, give us more screen space. Is many people just simply like to hyperlink it from something else in Accordance. So what I've done here is to show a search of a king. He wasn't particularly a good king, king of Israel, Omri. He was the father of Ahab. And I can select the word Omri, and then there's two ways I can open up the timeline after I've selected Omri. I can go here and do look up timeline, or I can go to what we call the Amplify menu, which lets us basically do almost anything from a selection. And we can go down here and do timeline also. So either way will open it, either the Amplify menu or the right click menu. So we'll go here to look up timeline. And now, instead of just simply opening the timeline, you see that it zoomed in to the reign of King Omri here. And so that's usually the way that people use it. It highlights it in red here so that we know that was the item we were looking for. And we could do it for other people in other places also, but this is an example. Now I want to show another example of that's a different kind of amplify to show you what's possible. Is that I'm going to switch over to another search that I prepared here for David. This is King David. So I'm going to go here, and this time we'll amplify just to show you the different ways to do it. We'll go to timeline. But David is a famous, well-known character. He has lots of items that include his name on the timeline because David's a very major character. So what we do is let you select which ones, because if you select them all, you can get sort of lost, and you're going to pick up people like David Livingston and David Brainerd, which have nothing to do with David. And so what we're going to do is pick out Samuel anoints David, and then I'm going to use the command key or the window key, I believe in Windows, and then I'm going to say I want anoints David, David slays Goliath, and David conquers Jerusalem. And so I'm going to pick these three items with the command key. If you use the shift key, I believe it'll select all the items in between. And then I'm going to say OK. And now on the timeline, you see that it selected all three items. Now, maybe we could zoom out a little bit here to see it. But there you see in red where David slays Goliath, David conquers Jerusalem, Samuel anoints David, so that we see the relative chronological relationship of this with other events nearby. So this is the way that you open the timeline, and that's what I wanted to show first. You can open it simply as a new timeline, and we'll show how to find things on the timeline a little bit, or you can open up, which probably most people do, as a hyperlink from something, from a text. And by the way, it's not limited to Bible text. Didn't prepare this, but I'll just show you. Let's say, for example, we open up a dictionary here. Let's open up Anchor, or let's do Easton's dictionary because everybody has that. And then now this happened to open up the article on Ahab. So I'll go up here from the dictionary and do the same thing and see where is Ahab mentioned. There's Ahab with respect to the other kings here, Omri and Jehu and Joram and so forth. So you can actually do this from almost any resource and hyperlink to the timeline. Okay, now let me open up the timeline and give you the big picture view of the timeline. I'm just going to open it up here, and I'm going to zoom out. The timeline's a little bit like the Bible Atlas, except that we're looking in time instead of looking in space. And I'm going to now describe the philosophy of the timeline. I have to zoom way out. You don't see the labels very well. There's lots and lots of events being shown here, but I'm going to describe the philosophy of how we use the timeline here. First of all, we have two main concepts in the timeline. The first is what we call a region. In other words, you can't just jumble all of the events together in time. What would be much, much more helpful is to divide the regions, especially regions related to the Bible that are connected with an event. For example, you see on the left, the way we handle a timeline is on the left, we have horizontal bars, and the label you see on the very left side, we have Egypt, Israel, Aram, Mesopotamia, Asia, Greece, Rome, and Italy. And so these are the regions. Now we actually have more regions than this, but I'll show you a little bit later how to pick the regions. But the point is, you see, if you pick a particular time, like let's say 1000 BC, now that opened up a report, but I was going to show that later. But if you just pick it, you see there's lots of events that happened at the same time. around this area. But by sorting them out by region, you make the timeline a lot clearer and easier to see what event is associated with what particular region. And I mentioned also that there's subregions. For example, you see 4 subregions in Rome and Italy, which deal with the question of the expanse of the Roman Empire. If you go to Israel, you see the 2 obvious ones here. Let me move it up a little further ahead. Here are, it's right here. Yeah, you see there's Judah, the united monarchy, and then you have Israel and Judah here, which maybe I could turn off some of these names here, but it's a little crowded. But there's Israel. You see it with the other events in Israel and in Judah here. So we have subregions where we can put the things that are associated with the subregion and so on. And Mesopotamia, I believe, is divided between Assyria and Babylon. So that's the first concept of the timeline, is that we sort the times, whether it's people or events or whatever, into these what we call regions and subregions, which are displayed horizontally. The next important concept on the timeline is what we call items. What determines what kind of items you're going to look at in these timelines? And what we've done is define item groups. And I'll go ahead and pull down this menu here so that you can see the different kinds. Right now, it is set to rulers and prophets. Now that's actually user defined, but if I open up the dialog here and open the layers, and we'll discuss the dialog, you see that we have 6 kinds of items of time things that we define. We call rulers, prophets, individuals, religious leaders. I know there's a little bit of overlap, like the prophet was sort of a religious leader, writings and events. And so each of them can be defined to have their own color and so forth. And those are the different kinds of items that we sorted out on the timeline database. But then the user can say, I want to pick which ones I want. For example, if we just do rulers, you see now you only pick the rulers. If you pick rulers and prophets, you get rulers, prophets, and we threw in events. If you get all user items, then we get everybody, except we could include the religious leaders, but that's applying a little bit later than Bible times. But the point is, the user can decide what groups you want to do, and we usually just provide a default set of groups for the timeline. Now I'm going to go ahead. We'll come back to that dialogue in a little bit, but that's what I wanted to describe. That the first item says, what kind of regions do I want to see? Second item here, that pull down menu, is what kind of items do I want to see? Okay. Now the other perhaps unusual or unique, I don't want to say it's unique feature, I actually picked this up from some ideas in some other books, is we associate a color with the region. Like you can see Rome and Italy are sort of a bluish color. And by the way, you could set those colors. Greece is brown. Mesopotamia has sort of a gray color. And Israel has sort of a brownish, light brown color. And Egypt is yellow. But you notice that some of these colors spill over. It's not just a clean color for each one. And what that shows is the dominating influence of one region over another. And for example, the most obvious one you see right here is Anatolia or Asia, which and you see up here you have the Persian Empire. Well, the Persian Empire conquered Mesopotamia, it conquered Aram, and it conquered Israel, and it even conquered Egypt for a certain while, but not as long. And so these colors show you the spillover, what I call spillover, or color bleeding, when one region is dominant over the other regions. Likewise, Mesopotamia, we have here the Assyrian Empire, which is gray, and it spilled over, conquered Aram, and also conquered Israel, but notice it did not conquer Judah. Remember, King Hezekiah held out against the Assyrians in Jerusalem. It did not completely conquer Judah. But then when we go to the second one, to the Babylonian Empire here, that it's the same color, but it's a later time. We label it Neo-Babylonian Empire here, although the name is a little cut off here. Then it conquered those same things, but then it also conquered Judah down here until the Persians came and conquered everybody, at least in that region, including part of Egypt. So this is a very important concept in the timeline where these colors will indicate the spillover when one region became dominant on the other. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about, that sort of summarizes the what I call the regional grouping of the timeline events. The other thing I want to talk about is the events themselves. When we started out on the timeline, we mainly were concerned with doing biblical events and people. But since then, we've gotten probably ambitious, maybe even a little too ambitious, and include things that are non-biblical. And that's why we have these other categories. For example, if you keep going after the New Testament here, let's say and by the way, here's the ruler at the top, tells us where we are chronologically. Okay, let's say like we go after 100 AD. Well, that's the end of the Bible. The New Testament is closed, but you notice that we still continue in the same region. There's the Holy Roman Empire. Here's conquering by Mamluks from Egypt that the Mamluks conquered, and so on. And we even list, if you look in detail here, probably can't see it very well, the Roman emperors. And then we can go on further here, and we even get up to present time, where here's Italy as a nation now, and Greek as a nation. And you see the Ottoman Empire was very, very dominant in that whole area. We tried to include modern events, and they're there if you want them, but not everybody wants them. But I'm just saying this is another upgrade that we made, where we don't just include biblical events, we show modern events. Now, part of the problem why you're not seeing many items up here is because we only are showing rulers and prophets, where there weren't many prophets, or at least I know some people call themselves prophet, but that are well known anyway up in the modern era. And there are rulers, and you can see if we zoom down here into Asia, then here's all the kings of the Byzantine Empire, for example, okay, because that was the controlling empire in Anatolia in around the 8th and 9th century, until it was conquered, well, until 1040, and when it was conquered, no, it was 1053, sorry about that, 1053, I believe, when it was conquered by the Muslims. No, I'm getting mixed up. So I'm getting mixed up with another, never mind. It lasted actually until until much later, when they finally took the city of Constantinople. Anyway, my point is, it's because of this. But if we go here and change it to, we change here to major figures or something like that, I'm not quite sure how that's defined. Now you get something totally different. You see, in the classical period of Greece, you get the prophets. They're not in there. And then if we go up further, well, I guess you don't have, you have major features. All right, let me go ahead and define here. I want to show you some of the other stuff. Let's just do all, and then you can see everything here. And then I'll show you later how to define it. If you go up here to Italy, now we have all the popes that were inside Italy. We actually have all the popes up to modern day. Let's see, whoops, looks like we stopped at 1860. Oh no, there they are. John Paul II. Well, we need to update. There's been 2 popes, Benedict and I believe Francis, so it's slightly out of date, but you'll let us go for that one probably. Okay, so anyway, this gives you an idea of, you have the regions and you have the items. I'm going to set it back to rulers and prophets to not make it as complicated. Okay, now there's one more concept on here that I didn't show. We have, now what we look at, let me zoom out again so that you can see it all. What we have here is on the horizontal, like I said, the regions. there we have the items, the events that took place, but there's one other class of items which I haven't shown you, and this is what we call extra items. How do you get extra items? Well, it's easy. You add them. How do you add them? Use the find. For example, this is open. The magnifying glass here opens up a dialogue, and you can say, well, when was First Maccabees written? Because that's not showing here. So let's add First Maccabees, and I'll show you more detail how to use this later. And then it jumps to First Maccabees, and notice it gives you the time. First Maccabees was written in this time period, but notice that it's in red. In other words, and it's in red because it doesn't belong to any of these groups of rulers or prophets that we predefine. But I want to see it in addition in relationship to the rulers and prophets. So this is what we mean by extra events, and I can keep adding them. I could actually go here. What would be a better one here? I want to see the 19th dynasty of Egypt. Well, actually, the 20th. I don't. Oh, 19th because it's in alphabetical order. There we go. Okay, I double-clicked it, and now I see there's the 19th dynasty. We'll zoom out, and you see that was the 19th dynasty now, and we can find either regions. This actually shows the name of a region here, the 19th dynasty, and then we see that's when Ramesses II, one of the more famous pharaohs, reigned in Egypt. So I can find anything, and these extra items will stay here until I tell it that I want to erase it. I can't see, the times are too far here. So those are the three classes of objects that you can look at in the timeline: the regions, the specific events or rulers or prophets or whatever, or the extra items, which can be anything. So that's the details of the principle of the timeline. You have the regions, you have the items, and then you have the extra items if you want to add your own special item here. So now I'm going to look at the interface of the timeline. And Mark, I'm going to have to interrupt myself here. Mark, are you listening to me still?
Yes.
Okay. I almost, do y'all usually wait till the end, or do we take questions in the middle or anything?
You from time to time you can stop and ask if there are any questions. That'd be great.
Well, maybe I could stop right now and see if there's any questions, because now I want to cover the interface of the timeline window. So,
yeah,
or do you have a few questions, Mark, that you've collected?
Well, I've answered some of them already. That are, I don't think everybody needs to hear it. So really, we've only got one person was asking about how you've customized your timeline, but I have a
We'll
feeling
get to that later.
Yeah, talking about that later. The only other thing is you might want to go ahead and close the text tab there to give more room for the timeline.
Okay, all right, we could do that. So I just wanted to open the text tab to show the interface. Okay, now we got a bigger window here. Okay, so we'll go ahead now and look at the interface of the timeline just to show you the controls and so on. The very upper left is the regions. What regions do we want to show? If we want to just show Israel by itself, we can clean it up and just show Israel and nothing else. Okay, or we can say Israel and its neighbors. So here we just show Israel and mainly this is what most people call the Bible lands. Okay, or we could show everything, but everything is much bigger. Now you see we've got the world, which is a later addition. We even include the pre-Columbian America, and there's just a lot of areas that are not covered by Bible lands. We call it world, and Western Europe and Eastern Europe, and again, this and Arabia. This is only if you really want to see everything. In Africa, the main focus of this timeline was the Bible lands, but we decided to go ahead and add even extra items. But I'm going to focus mainly on Israel and its neighbors. So this is how you pick which groups you want to see, and then I'll show you how to change the groups or how to define your own group in just a little bit. Okay, and that's the second one I showed earlier. What items do you want to see? Again, these are user definable. I want to see just the rulers, And so now I see all the rulers. We mean like kings, emperors, pharaoh, and so forth. Or I could say I just want to see the individuals. These are other famous people that were not rulers, is what we call individuals. For example, who is here? Oh, this is Marcion, Polycarp, and Papias. Those are early church fathers, for example. Okay, so that's the individuals. We'll go back now to rulers and prophets. Okay, and then you can hide the interface. That you won't use very often, but some people might want to show something. And this is the interface right here where I'm clicking the plus button. If you don't want this to interfere on the bottom, you can just hide it or show it. That's all it is. Okay, now we get to the really controversial part of the timeline. Most historians agree on times, up to about 1000 BC. Afterwards, they agree. But when you go back to earlier times, there's quite a bit of debate on times. And so we were trying to play the middle road on this. Maybe we'll get hit on both sides. I don't know. But you can actually set two different systems of times that mainly just apply pre-1000 BC. You could do the conservative dating, and the most obvious example of that is the date of the Exodus. And so here you see the Exodus, the Egyptian sojourn here. And this is using what we call conservative dating. And I'm not going to take sides on this. This is quite a bit of, even among conservative people, there's not even agreement on what conservative is, and likewise. Or you can go to the other one and what we call critical dating. And you see now that the Exodus jumped up here a couple of hundred years. Or we'll use, click on that and go back to conservative dating. So you could take your pick. We did our best. We did thorough research. If you see errors in the timeline, or if you strongly disagree with something, please let us know with a feedback report, which we have for anything related to accordance. If you don't agree strongly, just explain why, or if you see a blatant error. But we really tried to do our best to research this and to come up with what we considered the best dates. And another thing I might show here is, let's look at Yair. I'm going to zoom in and I'll show you how to do the zoom in just a second. You notice that Yair is an example here with a solid line and then a faded line. This is our notation for saying we don't know exactly when he lived or how long he lived. So we're just going to put an average date and then show the date range that he might have lived, because some of these people in the Bible really don't know exactly when they lived. We just did our best. And so especially, you notice this pre-1000 BC, you'll see that we have these faded lines which sort of give the range of when these particular people might have lived. Okay, so that's the dating system. Okay, the next item is, I'll just go above here, is the ruler. You see the ruler with the dates up above. Right now, I'm using the mode that says minus, which means BC, but you could change that and actually put BC or BCE, whatever you prefer in your system, but minus is the simplest and most compact, just to indicate pre-Christian era dates. Okay, so the find icon, I showed you an example earlier of it, but I'll explain it in more detail a little bit later. Now the next one applies to almost everything in accordance. We call this a recycle icon. Recycle is a feature in accordance that we developed so that you could reuse a window when it's, I think I should show this because a lot of accordance users, we use recycle for everything, but I'll show you with the timeline. So let me just go ahead and open up this again. And I'm going to say that, I don't know, just, well, let's do the example of David again. Or no, let's do the example of Omri. Okay, except I got to spell it right. There we go. Okay, and then I'm going to do again the same thing as before, look up on the timeline. And there I went to Omri. But now, if I go and search for his dad, or his son rather, Ahab, and now I do that one, it will reused the timeline. You see, there's still only one tab here. It reused it. In fact, it remembered Omri, and now it's added Ahab. And that's another way you add extra items, is when you hyperlink. It will show that hyperlinked item there. So now we have Omri and Ahab. But now if I turn off the recycle button, and now I go and look for King Asa here, or Asa, I guess they say, and do that timeline, now it opens up a completely new timeline. It has 3 items on it here, and that, you notice, is in a separate tab. And so that way we could keep the old tab, because we're saying don't override it, but open a new tab. And that's the concept of recycling, and it's used everywhere in Accordance for tools, for searching, for everything. But for those that may not realize it, that's a concept that you can turn off the recycling to save your window and force another similar type tab to open. Okay, so that's the recycle one. All right, I'll turn this off. We'll go back here to this. So that's the recycle. Okay, and of course the timeline, if you zoom in, you can just scroll it up and down with the scroll bar and so on, and that's pretty obvious. And the big thing is zooming in and out. You probably saw already that I'm using the zoom in and out buttons so that you can zoom it in and out like this. But then there's other ways you can do it. You can also do a marquee zoom in and out. And I did this marquee, and now I double click and it'll zoom in to what I did the marquee. Now there's another little shortcut you might not be aware of, but if you zoom out, you can hold the shift key down, and now it does it much bigger steps, 10 times bigger steps, so that if you need to quickly zoom way out, or if you want to go zoom in, you can hold the shift key, and you see in just 2 steps, I'm already, that's without the shift key, and then this is with the shift key, so it takes much bigger steps. Okay, and then below the zoom in and out buttons, you have a legend that says, here's the color code for the events, or the items rather, that I'm showing. The rulers are purple, the prophets are red, the events are green. And if I switch over to, let's say, individuals, now the individuals are orange. If I switch to all user items, then you see here is we have 5 categories. Actually, it doesn't show them all, but that's the way I defined all there. So that gives you a little legend so that you know what you're looking at. Okay, now below the timeline, let me zoom this way out again like this. Below the timeline, we have what we call an archaeological ruler here. And it doesn't make much sense in earlier times. Like this says Babylon, that's what archaeologists say. Babylon was dominant in the Middle East, then Persia was, then Greece was, and then you get to Rome, and then Byzantium, but this gets in the modern period. But what's more important is the really ancient stuff. Like, for example, Iron Age 1 and 2, you might hear archaeologists use that term. And then with bronze, it really gets messy, because you have a early bronze, middle bronze, late bronze, and then with the early bronze, you have early bronze 1, 2, and 3, and this is what in the middle bronze, 2A, 2B, late bronze 1, 2, and 3, and so on. But if you're confused about the archaeological date, this is what archaeologists like to use. Here, this ruler on the bottom, or timeline, shows you when archaeologists talk about late bronze 1, they're talking around 1450 or so BC. They're talking about middle bronze 2, that's a little earlier, 1850. So this is the other thing. So that, I believe, covers everything as to what the interface, as far as what are we looking at when we look at the timeline. So I call this the basic interface of the timeline. And now I'm going to go to the navigation, and I've already shown part of the navigation here because that was part of the interface, but I didn't show you a couple of shortcuts here. We did the scroll bar, we did the zoom buttons and the shift zoom, but one thing I didn't show you is if you hold the command key down, and by the way, you notice that the interface of the timeline is very, very similar to the interface of the Bible Atlas. Those are the same shortcuts and the same concepts for navigating apply to the Bible Atlas as well as a timeline. So if I want to move the timeline around, I hold the Command key down. You notice it changes to a hand, and then if I hold my mouse down, I can take this and move the timeline wherever I want just by holding the Command key down. So that's another way to navigate that's less cumbersome than trying to move scroll bars. And the other thing, that you may have seen me do earlier, for example, if I want to go back to Israel and look at the details of, let's say, the United Monarchy, I can select what they call a marquee, double click, and now I see much more details of all the events that happened during the time of the rulers. In fact, the events here seem to clutter things, so I'm going to show you an example, but I'll come back to it. I'm going to go back to redefine what I mean by rulers and prophets. I don't want the events. I'm going to turn it off, and that applies to rulers and prophets up here. Say OK, and now you see things are a lot cleaner and simpler. I can go up here. In fact, let's just use and now I see, without the clutter of the events, I see all the prophets and kings of the northern kingdom here without the clutter of the other events here. And this is what I'm trying to emphasize, that everything is very, very user definable. Okay, now there's one other thing that I want to show in conjunction with the timeline, and this is what we call the instant details. You can access it from the window menu or use Option Command 2, and this is used for everything in accordance, whether it's a Bible text, whether it's a timeline, atlas, or anything. If I go to the instant details here, it tells me what time I'm at. Like, for example, right there, I'm about at 880 BC or 880 minus 880. I'm in the Israel-Palestine region. Let me zoom this way out so you see the difference here. And then if I go somewhere else, it says I'm in the Egypt region. But what you might not have noticed is, let me go back again and zoom into the Israelite again. Let's go back to the kings of Israel right here, because I could see Israel and double click. If you put it over a name, not only do you get that, but you get additional details about the name. Who is Jehu? And you see there, we even put the entire Anchor Bible Dictionary article, although we recommend you hyperlink it because you can't see it. But if I expand the size of the instant details by just dragging here, I can see even much more of the article in the Anchor Bible Dictionary as well as that. If I don't have it over a name, I just simply get the region and the time. So this is a fast way to do this, but here's another thing you can do. If you hold the Option key down, you see that the plus appears. This is again analogous to the Bible Atlas. And on the Bible Atlas, you can drag this with the Option key or down, or on Windows, it's the Alt key. But in the timeline, we can measure time differences. So what's the difference between the time Omri started his reign to the time of Jeroboam II? And we could see it was about 92 years. So you can use this in an analogous way for the Atlas, or when was a time from Omri to Elijah? Well, it wasn't very much, because Elijah was just after the time, only about 23 years. And you see that Elijah and Ahab, his son, overlap, because we read about how Elijah interacted with the king Ahab. So anyway, you can use this to actually measure time differences. Okay, so now let's go. We've shown the navigation, we've shown the interface. I'm going to turn off the thing on the bottom here. Now what we're going to do is, people have already asked the question about customizations, but we're going to start showing you now how to customize everything on the timeline. But what you've seen already is really the basics of the timeline. If you don't do any customization, that really this is pretty much it. But I will show you how to change things on the timeline. And Mark, this is a good stopping point. Are there any other questions on what I've talked about so far?
There is a question on the archaeological periods at the bottom of the timeline. And the question is specifically, aren't aren't the archaeological periods context specific to a place in the world? For example, Israel could have been in the Bronze Age while the Philistines were in the Iron Age. So that, yeah, the question is, what are those in reference to?
They are in reference to what the archaeological community says they are. He is right that the Philistines had iron, but they don't call it the Iron Age of the Philistines, especially if you're talking about groups in the same general area like Israel and the Philistines. My understanding is that the Iron Age, if you look here at the bottom there, you see Iron Age 2, Iron Age 1. Iron Age 1 starts roughly at about 1200 BC. And he's right. That's when the Philistines interacted. But you notice, by the way, notice the bronze is orange and the iron is gray. And notice in between, we don't put a sharp boundary. We show how things sort of morph from one to the other because there is no exact dates for these. These are approximate dates. And it looks like that the archaeologists do consider the Iron Age as beginning is when the Philistines used iron, even though the Israelites didn't know the technology until later. So he is right, but we're just showing what we believe that the mainstream archaeological community defines as these ranges. And by the way, they've changed over time. Bronze Age 50 or 100 years ago is not quite the same as Bronze Age today. Anyway, any other questions, Mark?
That's great. One other thing, that's all the questions. I just wanted to also add, though, that you were, when you mentioned the conservative and the critical dates, if anybody has any questions about the where we got that information from, we didn't just create it ourselves, and the documentation for all that is in the help documentation. If you
right, and we actually give the references where we got the dates from.
Very good, and that's it. You can keep going.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to start now talking about changing regions and groups, okay? And that involves us opening up dialogues. And I already showed pretty much, I mean, maybe this is already redundant. Let me just zoom way out of here again so we can see more of the timeline. I already showed if you just simply want to change what you're doing, you just pull down the menu and change it. If you want to change the items, you pull down that menu and change it and so on. But what people are more interested in is the dialogue. And I'm going to go ahead and go through the dialogue. How do I define my own grouping? And we'll start with the region layers. You can go to define region layers. It's at the bottom item of this pull down, or you may not realize you can also go to display and define time layers. And there you see the layers that you can, and we're going to do the region and item. The custom and user will do a little bit later. So we'll open up this dialogue. And the way this works is a very similar pattern to all the dialogues that define the atlas and the timeline. Is on the upper left, these are the groups that I've defined, okay? And as you click on them, the properties of the group is everything else here. So whatever you've selected, that's what it's going to be here. Now, I could change things. For example, you saw that I changed, I could say, Israel and neighbors, I might want to include Arabia, for example, as a neighbor. And so when I do Israel and neighbors, I say, okay, and now we've added Arabia, but not much happened in Arabia, or at least not much in our history, till you get to the Nabateans. That's when when we have more recorded events in Arabia. So I changed this and added Arabia. I can go back and change it, and now I can say I don't want to include Arabia. But what are the things we can set? We could first of all have these controls here for saying, do I want a new item? Do I want to duplicate it? The duplicate saves you having to reset all these things if you want to make a small change. And delete, we can delete an item, and then up, down just simply as a way to select by clicking, or you could just click. For example, Israel, we just want one region. And so, and let's why don't we just go through a new one? Let's say I want to do, I'm going to do a new, and now it opened it up, and notice that it put it in the name. So I'm going to call this demo, since that's what we're doing is demo. Okay, so that's the name of my new region is demo. And then as I move over, I think I can just do a tab here. Yeah. Whoop. Okay, it hadn't given it its new name yet. It'll update it when I'm done. So then you can say, well, what's the font label? I want to know how to label this region. So you could do the font. I'll just do something a little serif, like let's do Palatino, for example. The color, I can either make it default or force it to own color. I'm going to say I want the color to be red, but really, yeah, let's do red. Just this is for demo. And then I can do bold or italic. That's this. And then I can even scale it up, make it a little bit dominant. And then this shows the sample of the style. You can change the style either here or here. The reason this appears is because some Unicode fonts have their own font for regular or bold, while here you could do it in either place, but here you can force the bold. So that's how you set the labels. Then you could set the region. So my region, I think, is just going to be Israel and Egypt here. We'll just turn these off here. Oh, we'll leave Egypt on. I don't like that sand color. I'm going to make Egypt green, and I'm going to make Israel, maybe let's make it all clay or something like that. I didn't come up with these names, by the way, but they give you the idea of the color. And then you can even decline to show the political periods. Now, this particular layer, you could show the political periods, and you could even, if you choose not to use the region colors, you can force them all to be the same thing. We have lots and lots of options for this, but I just wanted to overview what they do. So I'm going to say OK. Okay, now, well, that wasn't a good choice. I made them the same color. Let's go back. Now, there's a little shortcut you can use. After you've opened the dialog once, you can do Command L and bring it back. So, oops, made a mistake. Okay, that is for, I thought I set this to a different color. Why is that showing? Oh, it's because I didn't use the region colors, duh. There, see, I fixed it, and now we show the region colors. And again, you see Israel is brown, and then Egypt conquered. They actually own this part of Canaan. I should really say Israel or Canaan. That's an Egyptian sojourn. And then we come back here to the period of Exodus, Judges, United Monarchy, and the divided monarchy, and so on. So that's an example of how I did my own custom region that I called demo. And if I don't like that, I can just go back and delete it. And now it's gone, and and I'll set this back now to Israel and neighbors, rather. That's what I want. Say, okay, now we're back. So that's how to use that dialog. Then you have rulers and prophets. And this one gets a little more complicated, but I'll just open it up to the rulers and prophets here that we're doing. Whoop, I meant to open up the item layers here. Okay, and rulers and prophets is a similar thing. Here's the names of the item groups that you want to show. It's the same interface, duplicate, delete, up or down. Same for the font labels and exact same thing. But then you could include what do you want in your custom list. And you could just say all items, user item, and I'll show the custom list. You actually make up your own custom list. But right now, what we're going to do is saying we want all rulers and prophets, and we're going to check those two. We're going to give them a color. Again, I didn't come up with these names. Eggplant, that looks like the color of the eggplant, and scarlet looks like red. And there's a sample of how to look. And here's the time range. I could constrain these time ranges, say I just want to see rulers and prophets in a narrower time range here. So again, that's the interface, and I'll do a demo again. Here, I'll just go down to the bottom. You see, here's one of rulers and individuals. It also happens to have events on it. But I'm going to do a new, call it demo again, just for demo, and I can set the font to Palatino or some serif font like that, and we'll just leave the colors, make it a little bigger. And I'm going to say for this demo, I just want to see prophets and religious leaders, because there's sort of overlap, and I notice they're the same color, so I'm going to change this to emerald for this particular one, and I'm just leaving the time range as wide as possible. So I say, okay. And then what it does, it reopens, it sets the time, it automatically sets it to the demo, which is the one I set it to. And then you see, now you see prophets, and you only see prophets. To see religious leaders, we're going to have to go up into the much later into, I think, Rome. Yeah, we're going to see here's all the kings of the Byzantine Empire. There are lots and lots of them, and we see the popes here in the papal states here for the religious leaders. So this is just an example of how I'd use demo. I'm going to go back and let's go back to the define item layers, and I'm going to just get rid of that again, just delete it and come back to just what do we have here? Rulers and prophets. Okay, so now we're back to where we were. But you notice though, when I pull this down, there's more options. I had several more options. I have define item layers, define custom lists, and this is where you can define your own name, and you can say, here's what I want to include in it. Okay, like here's an example of the weeks of Daniel, and whoa, uh-oh, something's not right here. Uh-oh, we got a hang up here. It's crashed. Oh, what an embarrassment. We're gonna have to start over on that. Okay, so let's go and start over accordance again. I'm gonna launch accordance. Sorry about that. There's something on the custom. Mark, are you noting that? Mark? Hello?
Sorry about that. I muted myself. Yes, I've made a note of that. Thank you.
It's an obscure feature. That's probably why it wasn't reported. But let's go. You can define your custom list. I'm just going to show the dialog where you can pick the items that you want to include. This is, for some reason, no items when I go through here. Nothing's selected, and I'm not. Oh no, Mark, sorry, something's not right here. Okay, it's going to crash again.
Yeah, it looks like it.
I'm really sorry. This is really embarrassing in a demo. But anyway, it's because not many people use that feature, and we didn't. Okay, let's just recover and see what we've got here. Okay, good. We've recovered it. Okay, so let's go back now. I'm not going to do the custom. You can also define custom list where you can pick the item, but we need to fix that for the next rev that you want to show in your own list of things. You don't want to use our groups. You want to use your own group, and you can even define user items. And I'm not going to play with this. This is really a more advanced feature where you could say, I just want to add an item. And you see examples, King A, King B, King C. You could say, here's the range. Do you have circa or alternate or between? In other words, it lets you build your own events individually if you want to put events that we didn't have on our database. And that's all I'm going to talk about this, because this is a rather advanced feature. And if for some people, if they want to put like 100 events, it's rather cumbersome because you got to define everything here in the database for that, for each event. But there's some people that use that, but I'm not going to show it. But the interface works the same. You just do a new event, you can duplicate, you can delete the events if you're not going to use them anymore, and you just define the name, the time, and Bible references if you want, and what class it's in. Is this a ruler, prophet, individual, and the region, and so on. In other words, it lets you actually customize individual event data if there is something there that we didn't define. Okay, so that's a little bit on the customization. Now, you notice that these were just ways of defining the items in the timeline. The other thing you need to know is we also, well, there's a couple of other items here. Let me finish this before we go on. You can clear the extra items, and you can even take the items and convert them to a custom list using your own items. But those are rather advanced features. Let's see, convert. Yeah, it actually says, here's your items, the custom items, and now here's your items that you defined. And I know some people are going to get lost on this. And you can make those and automatically convert them. But this is a rather advanced feature, and I recommend you look on the Accordance help to find that, because we got some more stuff here we need to cover here. So anyway, let's first of all look at two things that show you what does the timeline look at when you first open it. The first thing we do, and this is a concept in accordance that we do for everything. If I've got the timeline as the front tab, every tab in accordance has a setting, and this one says set timeline display. If I happen to just open a Bible like this and it's the front, it'll say set text pane display. This has been a fundamental feature of accordance, that whatever the front tab is, that's the one that you can set its setting, and each window has a different, or each tab has a different settings. So you go over here, and now I'm going to set the timeline display, and this just simply says when you open it, what do you want to look at? And for that window, or what do you want to look at, or for the window I'm looking at, I should say it that way. Here's the font for the extra items, here's the color for the extra items, here's the style, and here is, do I want minus, or do I want BC 80 or BCE AC? Do I even want to show these archaeological periods? Okay, now what's probably most important in this front window is, what do I hypertext to for a tool and a text? And I haven't shown you that yet, because that's what I call using the timeline, which we're going to get to in just a second. So this says I will hypertext to the NASB, but I can change to anything. I can change it to another language, Hebrew Bible or whatever, or another language. What tool do you want? You can look at all of these different kinds of tools. We're just setting it to the Anchor Bible. Now, the other thing I meant to show on this is also, if you click, this is a concept in accordance. If you say okay, that only applies to the front window. Okay, and this is a concept with all the windows. But if you say use as default, you can click on that and say, I want these to be here whenever I open a new window for this timeline. And I can save that as a default if I want to. I'm not going to do that here. So that when it opens up new. Now, the other way to set things in the timeline is you go to the preferences, and that's Command comma. On Windows, I believe preferences are under the edit menu. And we do in the preferences have actually two panes for timelines. The first one says, what do I want to see when I open a new timeline? Well, I've got it here to set for Israel and neighbors. And then I also have it to set it rulers and prophets as the default items that I'll be seeing. Here's again the same ones. And then I set it to conservative, or you can set it to critical dates if you want to. So this is what happens when you open a new timeline. And then this is what happens. Here you can set for all of the timeline, not just for the particular one like we did, but it's the same thing. What do you want the color for the labels? What do you want the suffix of the date to be? And what do you want? You could set that for all timelines without having to go to the other one. Okay, so that's how you do your settings in the timeline. And then I believe that covers almost all the ways that you want to display the timeline. Again, I'll just review that set timeline display only affects the front window you're looking at, but the preferences set it for any new timelines that you might want to open up here. So now let's look at, just use the timeline a little bit more now. Okay, I believe we've covered all the features of the timeline. So I'm going to just do a simple amplify that I did earlier. I did Omri the king, and I amplified from David, and you saw that already. And again, let's look at the find here. You notice that I used the find. I found the words First Maccabees, but we've got lots and lots and lots and lots of categories here. Okay, so we have some shortcuts to help you find that. First, we can say find standard or just user items. If I say I want to look on user items, those are my user items that I define, and I can find those. But most people will leave this at standard items. But then I can say, instead of all items, I can say, I just want to see the prophets. So now I don't have the clutter of everybody else. Now I just have the list of prophets. It's not that long. Let's see when Jeremiah lived. I'll double click him, or you could say okay, and now it popped in, and there's when Jeremiah lived, the time frame for Jeremiah. And then likewise, it remembered that I was on prophets. Then I can go to rulers and see it's got more rulers here than we do prophets. I could go to, where are we? Boy, what do we have? We have presidents of the United States here too. I didn't know that. Oh, wow, there's a ton of rulers here. Let's go to King Jehu. Okay, like I said, we have more now, much beyond Bible stuff. So now we see Ahab and Jehu, and you see Jehu reigned after Joram, who was Ahab's son, and then Jehu took over from then. So we get the chronological relationship. So the find command is very useful. And likewise, I could say, I want the rulers just in Israel. And now that's going to knock out all those other guys where we saw presidents and popes. And so now we just see the rulers of Israel here. So this is very important because the list is getting quite long, and these are filters that you can use. You could say, I only want to see the rulers, or I just want to see the prophets. And actually, if I go to most other countries, I'm not going to see many prophets because I believe, nope, they're mainly in just Israel here. Okay, so this is your filters, and if you get overwhelmed with too many items, you can use these filters. So that's how to use the find. Okay, we could look up Ezekiel, and notice I did a double click. That's a fast way to get out. I just double clicked on Ezekiel, and then it's there. Now you notice we have all of these red items, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. I can get rid of them very simply by going here and say clear extra items. So if you are done with them and want to start over, you just say no, and now you notice the color changed from red to black because now these items happen to already be there, but they were put in red because they were the item you were looking for in red. Okay, so now we're going to go to the hyperlinking, and this is a very powerful feature that I haven't even shown yet. Let's say, for example, let's go to the prophet Isaiah, one of the more famous prophets. You can click on the name just with a single click, and now this little pop-up window occurs. So it gives me more detail about Isaiah. And by the way, I could get this detail also, I believe, if I go to the instant details here and just put the cursor over Isaiah. But if you don't have the instant details open, all you need to do is click on the name. You get more details. Prophet of Judah who served during the reigns of those kings. Now, there's some other interesting things on here. First of all, we have the range of his date, minus 740 or 740 BC to circa 680. We're not sure exactly when he died. And then you have two hyperlinks. And this is actually not a good example because they're the same. But one of them is a reference and the other is the name. And so you say, well, I want to know where Isaiah is mentioned in the Bible. You click on that. And whoops, that's the dictionary. I had it backwards. Okay, I want more details about Isaiah. So I opened up all the articles that have to do with Isaiah, and I happen to have the Anchor Bible Dictionary. If I want to change that, I'll just go and say, change this to the Erdman's or to ISBE Revised, something like that. And then I click on this, and now I get ISBE to open up instead of that. If I click on the bottom one, now here it's a little confusing because Isaiah has a book named after him. If I go there, now it pulls open the entire book of Isaiah because that's where Isaiah was. Let's do another one that's maybe Hezekiah. That's a better example. Hezekiah, if I click on him, you see now I can do a search for Hezekiah, and there I searched in the dictionary where the article is, or I can go and do 2 Kings and click, and it'll now pull up the verses in more detail that the label that the label said that showed the verses where Hezekiah is mentioned in 2 Kings 18 to 20. Okay, now there's another way. So what I'm getting at here is you can actually hyperlink in both directions. I can go over here and double click to do a default hyperclick without even opening up that dialog. I want to double click on Hezekiah, and it opens up immediately to the dictionary. I don't have to single click and then open it up. I could do that, but that's just another way of doing the same thing. I can double click on Hezekiah. okay? But what's interesting is it works both ways. Now here in text, we use triple click instead of double click because by default, double click, it means to select a word. So I'll double click like Ahaz, and now I could right click and say, look this up on the timeline. And now it jumped to Ahaz here. So my point is you can go back and forth. You can hyperlink from the timeline to something else, or you can hyperlink from something else like a dictionary or the Bible or whatever and go to the timeline. The linking works both directions, okay? Now, another thing that I didn't tell you about here is that some people have asked, how do I extract this time data that you have? Well, there's two ways to do it, and you could do a report. First of all, you have Hezekiah, okay? I didn't talk about the last tab. This is this little icon in the upper right. If I click on that, it will give me a report on everything that happened during the reign of Hezekiah, okay? And his son Manasseh overlaps a little bit, but that's the report. That's one way to do a report. You can just click on anything and do the report, and that's the report for Ahaz, and it gives you the details of what we have, the dates, and who these people were, so you can extract that. And then this is just a simple text file. You can just copy stuff and just with the clipboard and so on, just like you do anything else. But the other way to do a report is sort of cool, I think anyway, is I can say, I want a report on everybody that lived from 700 AD to 750. So you go click, drag up on the timeline, and that tells you the range, and there let go, and it gives me a report on everybody who happened to overlap that particular time range. So that's two different kinds of reports. You can do a range up in the timeline, or you can just click here on the item. Okay, and again, this report is exportable. You can print it, save it, copy and paste, whatever. Okay, and the other way you can export data in the timeline is exactly the same way you do it from the atlas or the picture. Let me just zoom out a little bit here. Here we are at Judah. I can just take this entire window and say copy picture. It's going to be a big picture, and then I'll go to something like text edit here and do a paste. And there, well, I didn't leave the window big enough. There it is. There's that entire picture. So I can just simply say copy picture. Let's delete that. Now, if the window was smaller, it wouldn't have been so bad. But the other way, without shrinking your window, is simply draw a marquee. I want to see all the kings and prophets of Judah. So I'll select that, go up to edit, copy picture selection, and then in the same way, now we just paste into here, and now we see in the timeline, it has just Judah and nothing else here from the timeline. So those are the two ways. So you can do a textual export or a graphical export from the timeline. Now, I've covered an awful lot of stuff here, and our time is about up, and I have some other things I want to talk about. But one more thing that's always important is to get help. If everybody remembered everything I said, you're an excellent listener. Okay, most people will probably forget a lot of what I said, but so how do you get help? Well, the obvious way to get help is what you're already doing now, is to listen to the eAcademy pod or broadcast, what we're doing here, or webcast that we're doing here. That's one way to get help, but you also have help up here. And I want to just show that to you a little bit because, whoops, that's text edit. I'm still in text edit. We got the accordance help. There's a lot of ways of getting accordance. It's in the help menu. I believe it's under utilities for Windows user. You can first just simply do a search. Like for example, I want to search for how to do, for example, a region. Okay, and what it does is open up 3 menu items, and it'll actually point to the menu that tells you where I can open up or define a region, define atlas layers, or that applies to atlas because they both use the same word, region, or time layers. So now it's pointing out where I can go and open up the region layers. Now the rest of this help is more Apple's, more generic help on the Mac. It's not specifically for accordance. The other thing I can do is, let's clear that. we can go to the accordance help, and then I could say regions, or well, let's say time region, time, if I can type here, timeline regions, and then it returns a result. There's the timeline, there's the data tab, here's working, there's lots and lots of help. The timeline layers, this explains the concept of region layers and so on. There's a very extensive online help. If you're not sure or forgot something that I might have mentioned, this help is exhaustive. This tells you every feature that Accordance does, even though we do add features and it sometimes gets a little out of date. But this is how another help. And then likewise, you can also do help from getting started. We've got all of these training. Here we have webinars, videos, getting started. But the one that a lot of people may not know, and we've got blogs and forums. You can go to any of this to get help on using timeline. But the other nice thing is we have tutorials. And so I'm going to go to the timeline tutorial and says, how do I amplify? How do I open the timeline? That's a pretty easy one because I've already shown you. But this says, this tutorial will teach you how to open the timeline. So I begin, okay? First, open the library. Hint, you can open the library. So I'm gonna go here and it tells you, it says, do it for me. I think this is a really unique way of doing help. It's like holding your hand. So now we go to the library here and open the library, okay? Then it says it's located in the background section of the library, so we'll go to that. Okay, there it is. And then we'll say, do it for me. And now, went there, there's the button, okay? Double click the timeline to open it. And there it is, continue. And now it talks about a little bit about the different kinds of layers that we've talked about it, and it explains a little bit about the timeline, okay? And it continues and explains. You could choose the items you want, do it for me. You see it picked rulers, and you can continue and say which region do you want. You can scroll up and down, do it for me. I'll just let it do it for me because it's faster this way. Anyway, so this tutorial actually teaches you how to do all the features that I showed you in this seminar. I'm going to stop it here. I think you get the idea here. Okay, so that's the help. And so there's lots and lots of ways of getting help. Now, Mark, this is a good time to stop because I believe I don't know how much time I have, but I believe I've covered pretty much everything on the timeline. Are there any questions? I'm going to be moving to something else that I was asked to talk about myself a little bit afterwards, but let's ask if there's any questions or comments on the timeline that maybe we need to answer here.
Yeah, there's a few of them. Let's see. When you were looking at your timeline settings, it looked like you had Anchor selected as your default amplify tool, and someone was asking why you had that instead of the Photo Museum 3. Pros or cons between either one of them?
The Photo Museum, that's an excellent question because the author, David Lang of the Photo Museum, he tried to connect it to the timeline so that you would see it. Well, that's very easy to change. I mean, we just simply go here to the preferences here, and I can set it to the Photo Museum. Where is it? Finding it's going to be the big problem because we have so many. Why isn't the Photo Museum? I know I had the, oh, here it is. It's way at the bottom. I'm going to go to the Photo Museum. And now, that's an excellent question. Do you want to apply this to the one that I have open? Yes. Okay, now I'm going to double click on Isaiah. And now we see Isaiah is mentioned in the Photo Museum, but he doesn't have an article, but he does appear in the Photo Museum. What I really want to do is the Photo Museum more talks about rulers than prophets. So let's see what we get with Hezekiah. You see there we have an article on Hezekiah, and what's cool about the Photo Museum is we see the objects connected with Hezekiah. There's his seal. It's not a, and there's the, well, that's related to bronze serpent. And So this is just a list of all the kings of, well, this is actually all part of the Hezekiah. There's the bronze serpent, and Hezekiah mentions how he destroyed the bronze serpent. You can see the link to the passage there. Holy of Holies. Hezekiah tore down high places. This may be the Holy of Holies at Arad, at a high place, and there Hezekiah built the broad wall. There's lots of stuff related to Hezekiah. Here's the famous tunnel that's mentioned twice in the Bible that he dug to bring water in. All of this is just an article on Hezekiah here. And there's the famous Siloam inscription that they found in the tunnel. And so anyway, and it's a very long article just on King Hezekiah. So that's why I didn't happen to have it, but if you go to make the photo museum the default, you can easily go to these articles. I think let's do another one. Let's go to Uzziah, who isn't going to have as many. I'm just going to double click, and there it jumped to the photo museum, and you see there's not as much except for this epitaph. That's something from archaeology on King Uzziah, but that's it. So anyway, I've probably gave more than what you needed to know. That was the answer to that question. Go ahead, Mark. Are there other questions?
Yeah, someone's asking, it looks like there are some white vertical lines between some of the inside of the region layers that separate some of the different kingdoms, and they were just curious about those. I mean, you can see them right there on the screen. It's sort of like dividing.
They're sort of dividing lines. I think we put them there to show the divider. And also another thing, notice like on the Assyrian Empire or even on Israel, notice that there's fuzziness on the left side. What we're allowing for is a transition from one region to the next. But we still try to put a minimal divider line if we know the date, just so that it's just a divider line. Well, actually, you know what? We don't have a divider line over here on the right. It could be a small gap in time, but I wanted to call attention to the fuzziness, how this fades, because it's a sort of a transition, like from the United Kingdom to the divided kingdoms and so on. You're right, I would just call it a divider line, or possibly a small gap in the times. Okay,
Yeah.
anything else?
One final question. Someone was asking, and you might have covered this, or it actually might have been part of, the bug that we need to fix with the crash. But this person was asking, saying that she had a small census date that she wanted to add, and she didn't know how. Is that something?
She wanted to add what now?
A census date, just a small.
Okay, well, that's a custom item.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid the answer is, what she would do to do this is add user items. Now, we call that a user item. A custom list is a group of items that may or may not be user items. The user items, so let's just do the example here. New, I'm going to call this census date. Problem is I don't know the dates for this. And I don't know which census, but I'll just pull out some names. Let's call it -6 to 6. I did this because this is the census mentioned in the New Testament. Wait, sorry, I did the wrong one. Let's say that's if you have a range of beginning and a range of end. So we'll go to 6, and then I'm going to call this an event. Okay, and this applies mainly to Israel. Don't need any subregions. And you could put the Luke passage, but I don't remember it by memory. I'll just say Luke 2, whatever. Caesar Augustus called us, maybe I think it's Luke 2:1, but I'm not sure. Just say Luke 2. I say, okay, good. And now I've got that as a user item. And so now I can go up here. Let's just say rulers and prophets. Let's see here. I meant to add to that. Okay. All you can add is a custom list to this. You'd have to make a custom list, but I'm reluctant to do so because we had some crashes on that. But that's how you define any event, like a custom list. And then, wait a minute. Yeah, you see, then I would have to add that. See, item details. Wait a minute, all items. Let's see what happens here. Yeah. Anyway, I think you need to define it in a custom list, but the problem is the custom list we had some problems with that need to be fixed pronto.
Right,
Okay.
and let me just add that we do have webinars that discuss how to do this, and it also is recorded in the help documentation, so you might want to check both of those to find more information about that.
Anything else, Mark?
That's it right now.
Okay, well, I'm going to move into another very short period. I was asked by Accordance. I work with Accordance as a consultant and programmer, but my relationship to Accordance is now different. Most of you probably know that. And a lot of people have asked, what's Roy up to now? And I want to just show you a couple of things I'm up to, and then we'll finish here. The first thing is I started a new company called Gesher Media. And the focus of it is not Bible software, because I think Accordance is the greatest, by far best program for doing Bible software, but rather to focus on how to connect the Bible by means of media. And I'm going to go ahead and open up our website here. Where is it? There it is, Safari. There's our front page of our company. And I'm not going to show you everything, but you see photographs. The main two items right now, I'm not going to go into the website, are photographs and documentaries. And you can come to the website and explore yourself. It's at geshermedia.com. And that's the name of the company. And by the way, Gesher means bridge in Hebrew, and that's why the logo here shows a bridge. And that's our sort of our vision, is to build a bridge to the Bible by visual means. The first mean is still pictures. The pictures, a few of these pictures are on Accordance, but in the Accordance, they're mainly in the context of the dictionaries like the Photo Museum or the Photo Guide. But what we've done here is set up a gallery and have done the software right online. You don't have to be an Accordance user or anything. We've set up a gallery to show high quality pictures at higher resolution than what you get at Accordance. And here's some examples of some of the what I consider interesting pictures from Egypt and other places, Israel, the Jerusalem, and so on. And the thing I want to show you is exploring the gallery. Okay. And what's unique about this, there's lots of pictures on the internet. Other people have picture galleries and so on. But what's unique about this is not the key word. In other words, this gives you sort of the palette or gallery of pictures, but this is showing everything. And it's really overwhelming because we already have thousands of pictures and more coming online. So we need to be able to narrow this some way. Well, the one way we can narrow it is just simply type. So for example, if I say, for example, I want, oh boy, I'm trying to think of a Philistine. Let's just do that. Philistine. I want pictures related to Philistine. So it goes through, and remember, this is done online. This is a web-based application. This is not a Bible software. Now I see everything related to Philistines. Now, some of these are obvious, like Mycenaean pottery and so forth, and two-horned Philistine insets. And you see the selection here, okay? But I don't know, let's take this first picture. What on earth does this reenactment of weaving have to do with Philistine? So I'll click on that and say, I'm interested in this picture. Now we get more detail of the picture here. We get more information. And apparently, Philistine must be mentioned in the biblical relevance. I'm not quite sure why Philistine showed up, but the point is you get more detail. You have the title, you have all the Bible references, you put the cursor on the Bible reference and you get it. Ooh, is this not working? Okay, we had some trouble with this and looks like, let's see if I say more. Yeah, this is not working. Oh boy. Yeah, we're using Bible Gateway to do this with, but for some reason it's not working. You should have seen the verse reference pop up. We need to fix that. Then you see all the key words. You see, where did we get this from? The Pharaonic village in Cairo on the Nile River cruise. And then what's the biblical relevance? Textiles were very valuable in ancient Israel. This just gives you, and then you notice a few fields are locked because they only appear when you buy the picture. And then you have site, country, and then you can add that and say, you can just say, I want it as a favorite. Is a favorite not working? It should be, the favorite should be working, or I add it to the cart, and now it says it's added to the cart. In other words, this is just like the typical add to the cart and then buy it. I can go back now to the gallery. And the other thing that's unique about this is not just the Philistine part of it, and I'm not sure why this first picture had Philistine in it. It must be something with the biblical relevance. But you see pictures related to the Philistine. You see Philistine artifacts. You see there's an image of a Philistine warrior that I could do. That's from the Philistine Museum in Ashdod. And again, the same idea, but I don't understand why this is not working. There's a bug to it. It's still a little bit in development, even though it's mostly ready. It's because we're developing this actually as a web application. Okay, but then what we can do, instead of a quick search, we can do book searches, and this is the real power. We can do book, because many people have keywords associated, but what we have done is associated the Bible with this, because this is the purpose, is to connect you with the Bible. So we can go to book groups, like for example, we could say, let's go to the Gospels, show me all the pictures that cite the Gospels. And so it updates, and some of the pictures cite the Gospels, and Revelation 3:5, again, we have a little bug there, but if I click on this picture, what does this Egyptian picture have to do with the Gospels? Well, it's because there's some allusion to death in Revelation, but again, this reference isn't working. I think if I click on it, yeah, it'll go to Bible Gateway, and it says, it talks about white robes and the book of life. Well, this picture happens to be from the book of the dead of the Egyptian. It's the same idea of the future, of what would happen to Pharaoh after he died. So you can click on it, but we were hoping that the instant would appear, but it's not working. But the point is that's the picture you get, and you get a higher resolution picture than what you even see here. And it's been cleaned up and all of that. And you can even be much more specific. I could say, give me all the pictures, let's just say, of a specific book and reference. So let's go here, and let's just do the New Testament. Let's say I want Luke chapter 2. And by the way, this shows only the chapters that are relevant. So if I go to verse, you notice it starts with 5, because there are no pictures of Luke chapter. And so I just want the reference. I want a picture that cites Luke chapter 2, verse 5, and we see only 3 pictures that relate to the Kidron Valley. And I'm going to click on this and see, just a second here. This is incorrect. I wanted chapter 2, verse 5, but it's showing only Luke chapter 1. Okay, this is still in development, and I'm not sure why it's there. We'll have to do it, but you get the idea. That's the interface, and the unique thing about this is the pictures, where we not only put keywords and clean them up, and we've cataloged them in detail so that you can search by those fields, but we also, if you click on that picture, you see it gives you exact details, and most importantly, which most pictures don't do, is what is the relevance of that picture to the Bible? And we need to fix the references here. But the important thing is you can find the picture by Bible reference and combine it with keywords. Let's do one more example of this. I want to see where Herod is mentioned in the book of Mark here, okay? And there you see, this is the southwest corner, and you see here is Mark 12:10, and I could click on that, and then it talks about the rejection. I think that particular reference, what it does, it doesn't mention Herod in the Bible, but rather what it does is mention Herod as far as this was the temple that Herod built. And I think, yeah, Herod the Great is one of the key words for this, is the corner, the southwest corner of the Temple Mount, and Herod the Great was a key word. So it picked that picture up, but it says it also happens to mention Luke chapter, Mark chapter 12. So this is just an example, and you're welcome to check it out. We still got a few glitches in the website, but we do have it set up for e-commerce, and we have plans for purchasing. The prices are extremely reasonable, and we just want to get these pictures out there because there are some unique pictures in here. Now let's go to the second thing. The second thing is if we go back here to the main home page, we also have documentaries. We're working on several documentaries related to the Bible, and we've completed one of them, which we now have. You can view it, and I'm going to show you it's a 36-minute documentary on the Philistines and how they interacted with the ark. And let me just say a little bit about this documentary. This is a whole new thing that we feel nobody else has really done this way. The price is only $7.99, but I'll show you it here, the trailer. But we're trying to bring the Bible to a audience that maybe doesn't know a lot about the Bible, but at the same time, we're using the highest level of scholarship and academic credibility. These are top flight scholars and archaeologists that are going to talk about this, and it's going to connect to Bible events. That's sort of our goal, is to draw people into the Bible, but yet give them a lot of visual feedback to help bring that alive. And what I want to show now is not our website, but I want to go back here and run, because we already uploaded it. I'm going to set the screen now to the master trailer, and you can see it. I'm going to need some help from you all, because I don't know if this screen, I'm going to fill the screen up. I hope I'm doing this right. I'm filling the screen, and now I'm going to run this, and you should hear the sound. And Mark, can you tell me if you're not hearing the sound? Mark?
I'm not hearing anything yet.
Well, I haven't started it. So let's go ahead and start it, and tell me if you don't hear any sound. Muted.
Yeah, it's looking good. Yep.
Who were the Philistines?
When you read the biblical text, it's very clear that the Philistines are related to as one of the main enemies of the Israelites and the Judites.
You're talking about a period when empires are sticking their noses in the business going on here.
And then there comes a certain point when the Israelites need to go and face the Philistines, their enemies, in a battle. They become really scared, and they ask for the ark to be brought to the battlefield in order to help them win the battle against the Philistines.
The Israelites were not supposed to do this.
The ark is lost, and it's this horrible event, this disaster.
So this is a very powerful moment for the Philistines. They really need to consider what might be the ramifications of messing with Israel's God.
Okay, I want to just say a couple of things about this. First of all, you can see it's
Roy,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
yes, could you just put your accordance back up, or your video? We're just seeing the black screen right now.
There. Okay, do you see the website now? Oh, you're right, it turned off my screen. Thank you for telling me.
Here we go. Thank you.
Well, that's the video of me, but not of the screen. How do I get the screen
just
on?
go back over to show.
Oh, I see it. I got it. Main items. There we go. Good. Sorry, I don't use GoToMeeting very often.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyway, you can purchase this right now. That is done. We plan 5 more episodes related to the tabernacle, and we eventually will be doing an hour-and-a-half episode focusing on detail on the travels and development of the tabernacle, including the latest excavations at Shiloh, where they believe they may have found some remains of the tabernacle there. But this is our first episode. You can purchase it on Vimeo, and it'll take you to Vimeo, and you see the screen now. And this is actually, you can buy anytime, and this has actually been released. And I just wanted to let you know, but we do have in the next several months other videos. And I might mention that it's very graphically rich. You might have seen the Philistine army in computer simulation based upon the pictures that you see at Medinet Habu in Egypt. And then you also saw which I've never seen before, the actual temple of Dagon, where they took the ark and the idol fell down during the night, which is part of the story of the ark being in but I've never before seen a computer simulation of the Temple of Dagon, and it was done really well. So that's about it. And I just wanted to give a little commercial here, because a lot of people are asking, what am I doing? And that gave you a little taste of some of the things we're working on. And so I think we'll stop here. Let's finish this, and now we're back to the timeline. And so Mark, I guess we're done. And what do we do? Any questions about the extra stuff that I showed you on the documentary pictures or the video?
Yes. Someone's asking, what are the copyright restrictions for the use of the images on the site?
That is on our website, but generally for any use, it's similar to what Accordance's uses are, that for any academic, teaching, preaching, educational use, you're free to use, and we even allow you to use them in scholars' publications as long as you acknowledge the source. The only place where we would ask you to restrict is A, not to distribute the pictures, just like you're a distributor, and B, if you use it for what in our opinion is a commercial work, like making a commentary that needs all these pictures, that's for sale, you might. But I would say for 99% of the users that simply want to use it for study or Sunday school or teaching or whatever, you're free to do so. It's similar to the Accordance restrictions of the pictures on Accordance.
And could you, one more time, could you remind everybody what the URL for, is it geshermedia.com?
Yes, it's Gesher, or you can put www in front. Gesher, GESHERMEDIA.com.
Great, and I think those are all the questions. A lot of really good responses. Everybody's saying thank you very, very much. It's a wonderful presentation, very helpful. And I'll turn it back over to Rick. If Rick's in Louisiana in the middle of a hurricane warning, so I don't know if he's online or not. But Rick, you there?